Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to spend the next few minutes diving into a classic book that absolutely changed the way I see the world. It's all about the psychology of persuasion, how to influence others ethically, and just as importantly, how to protect yourself from being manipulated. The book is Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Dr. Robert Cialdini. In it, he breaks down the hidden psychological principles that drive our behavior. By the end of this video, you'll get a glimpse into the weapons of influence that make it so hard for us to say no. Now, what I love about this book is how it starts. Cialdini admits something really personal. He's always been a sucker. Door-to-door salespeople, charity fundraisers on the street. You name it, he found it almost impossible to turn them down. His house was filled with stuff he never wanted, all because he couldn't say no. This constant feeling of being taken advantage of made him incredibly curious. What mysterious force makes us say yes when we really mean no? Why does a slight change in wording suddenly make people agree to things? So he went undercover. He worked in sales, in fundraising, and in advertising to figure it out. What he discovered is that our brains have developed an energy-saving shortcut mode to deal with our complex world. It's like your brain goes on autopilot for certain decisions. For example, when we see something expensive, we often assume high price equals high quality. Or, when someone in a lab coat gives advice, we tend to trust them because we associate the coat with expertise. Cialdini tells a great story about a friend who owned a jewelry store. She had some turquoise jewelry that just wouldn't sell. Frustrated, she left a note for her staff telling them to mark the price down by half. But the employee misread it and accidentally doubled the prices instead. And you know what happened? The entire collection sold out almost immediately. The tourists shopping there didn't know much about turquoise, so they relied on a mental shortcut. Expensive equals good. The higher price tag made them believe the jewelry was more valuable. Cialdini calls these automatic reactions click-whir responses. They usually serve us well, helping us make quick decisions. But here's the problem. Some people know exactly what these triggers are. They intentionally design their requests and offers to push our mental buttons, getting us to comply without us even realizing it. These exploited shortcuts are what Cialdini calls the weapons of influence. So, what are these powerful weapons? How do they work like invisible magic tricks, quietly shaping our decisions every single day? Well, that's exactly what we're going to start unpacking. Let's dive into the first and most fundamental weapon of influence Cialdini identified. Let's talk about a secret weapon of influence. Have you ever noticed that a lot of what you do each day feels automatic? Almost like you're on autopilot? It's like someone presses a button, and a pre-recorded tape in your brain just starts playing. In his book, Influence, Robert Cialdini calls this the click-whir effect. Click, a trigger happens. Whir, an automatic behavior follows. Now, this isn't just a human thing. It's all over the animal kingdom. The book gives a classic example. The mother turkey. She's a fantastic mom, super protective and caring. But what triggers her motherly instincts isn't seeing her chicks. It's hearing them. The cheep cheep sound is her trigger. If she hears that sound, she'll nurture whatever is making it. If a chick is silent, she might completely ignore it, or even worse, accidentally harm it. Scientists did a wild experiment to prove this. They took a stuffed polecat, the turkey's natural enemy, and put a small speaker inside it that played the cheep cheep sound. Normally, a mother turkey would attack a polecat on sight, but when she heard the cheeping, she did the opposite. She started to care for the stuffed enemy, tucking it under her wing. As soon as the sound stopped, she went right back to attack mode. It's like her brain had a mothering tape that was automatically triggered by that one sound, no matter what it came from. You might be thinking, that turkey is pretty simple-minded. But hold on, because we humans are not so different. We have our own automatic tapes. A psychologist named Ellen Langer ran a brilliant experiment at a library copy machine. A researcher would try to cut in line, and they tested 3 different ways of asking. First, they said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine because I'm in a rush?" A whopping 94% of people said yes. Makes sense, there's a good reason. Next, they just said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine?" Only about 60% of people agreed. But here's where it gets interesting. For the 3rd try, they said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine because I need to make some copies?" Well, duh, of course you need to make copies. That's what the machine is for. It's a completely meaningless reason. But, incredibly, 93% of people still said yes. This shows that we don't always listen to the reason itself. The word "because" is the trigger. Our brains hear "because" and automatically assume a valid reason follows, making us much more likely to agree. Click, were. So why do our brains work like this? Because the world is incredibly complex. We face a constant flood of information and decisions every single day. If we had to deeply analyze every choice, we'd be paralyzed. So, our brains developed mental shortcuts. These are simple rules of thumb based on past experience that usually lead to the right decision. Think back to the story about the turquoise jewelry. The tourists had a mental shortcut. Expensive equals good. And usually, that's a decent rule. Pricier things are often better quality. So, when the price doubled, it triggered their automatic buying response. Studies show this everywhere. People who drink more expensive energy drinks perform better on tests, even if the drink is identical to a cheaper one. People who take pricey painkillers report more pain relief, even with the exact same ingredients. It's the expensive equals good shortcut playing out. These mental shortcuts are like our brain's autopilot. Most of the time, they're super helpful, saving us time and energy. But there's a catch. When someone figures out what our triggers are, they can use them to their advantage. It's like the female firefly that mimics the mating signal of another species to lure in males, and then eats them. In human society, marketers and compliance professionals use these triggers all the time. They create artificial scarcity with limited time offer, or only 3 left in stock. They give you a free sample to trigger the rule of reciprocity, making you feel like you owe them something. They'll wear a uniform or a lab coat to appear more authoritative and trustworthy. Cialdini also points out another powerful tool, the contrast principle. This means that if you see 2 things one after the other, your perception of the second one is skewed by the first. For example, if you lift a light object and then a heavy one, the second one will feel much heavier than it actually is. Salespeople are masters of this. In a clothing store, they'll show you an expensive suit first. After you've agreed to that big price, a tie or a shirt seems cheap in comparison, so you buy it without a second thought. Real estate agents do it too. They'll show you a few overpriced rundown houses first. Then, when they show you the house they actually want to sell, it looks like a fantastic deal by comparison. All of these are subtle ways our decisions are influenced without us even realizing it. These automatic responses were designed to help us navigate a complicated world. But, like any powerful tool, they can be misused. Understanding how these triggers work is the first step to protecting yourself from being manipulated. Next part, we'll dive into one of the most powerful and universal principles of all, the rule of reciprocity. Now, we're diving into one of the most powerful psychological weapons of influence, the rule of reciprocity. You've heard the saying, "You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours." Well, this isn't just a friendly proverb. It's a rule deeply wired into our brains and found in every human culture on Earth. Have you ever gotten a holiday card from a complete stranger and felt a weird urge to send one back? That's reciprocity. In his book, Robert Cialdini talks about a professor who sent Christmas cards to a list of random strangers. The result? He was flooded with cards in return from people who had no clue who he was. They were just automatically responding to the deep-seated feeling that a gesture must be repaid. When someone does something for us, we feel indebted. It's why we say, "Thank you," when someone holds a door, or why we make sure to get a gift for a friend whose birthday party we attended. This isn't just small-scale stuff, either. In 1985, Ethiopia, a country suffering from a horrific famine, sent $5,000 to aid earthquake victims in Mexico. Why? Because 50 years earlier, in 1935, Mexico had sent aid to Ethiopia during its own crisis. Across decades, continents, and unimaginable hardship, that debt of gratitude remained. That's how powerful reciprocity is. Since we're taught from a young age to return favors, we hate being seen as a freeloader, and this is exactly where persuaders see an opening. They know how to flip this rule against us. First, reciprocity can overpower liking. You don't even have to like someone for it to work. Imagine a pushy salesperson offers you a free sample. Suddenly, your guard drops. You've been given something, and that reciprocity button has been pushed. In one famous study, a researcher named Joe gave some participants a free bottle of Coke. Later, he asked them to buy raffle tickets. The people who got the free soda bought twice as many tickets as those who didn't. It didn't matter if they liked Joe or not. The feeling of owing him was stronger than their personal feelings. Second, even unwanted favors create a sense of debt. You didn't ask for it, but you still feel obligated. Think about those fundraising letters that come with free gifts like address labels or notepads. You didn't request them, but when you see that donation form, saying no feels a lot harder. The Disabled American Veterans Organization found that including a small, unsolicited gift in their mailers nearly doubled their donation rate from 18% to 35%. They're creating an obligation you never asked for. Third, reciprocity often leads to unequal exchanges. That nagging feeling of being indebted is uncomfortable, and we want to get rid of it fast, even if it costs us. This means we often give back way more than we received. Remember Joe and his 10-cent Coke? People ended up spending 50 cents on his tickets, a 500% return on his investment. We'll often overpay just to clear that psychological debt. Finally, there's the reject, then retreat tactic. This is a sneakier version of reciprocity. Someone makes a big request they know you'll refuse. When you say no, they immediately retreat to a smaller request, the one they actually wanted all along. Their concession makes you feel like you should make a concession too. A Boy Scout once asked Cialdini to buy a $5 circus ticket. He refused. The boy then said, "Well, how about a $1 chocolate bar?" Cialdini wasn't even hungry, but he bought two. The boy's retreat felt like a favor, and he felt compelled to return it. So, reciprocity is a double-edged sword. It's the social glue that promotes cooperation and trust, but it can also be a powerful tool for manipulation. By understanding how it works, you can recognize when it's being used on you. Now that we've seen how reciprocity works and how easily it can be turned against us, the next weapon of influence we'll explore taps into another powerful human tendency, one that's even more personal and harder to spot: the principle of liking. Now, let's talk about the third weapon of influence: the principle of liking. It sounds super simple, right? We're more likely to be persuaded by people we like, but behind that simple idea is a surprisingly powerful force. Just think about it. You're way more willing to say yes to a friend's request, even when it's a bit inconvenient. And how many times have you bought something? Not because the product was a must-have, but because it was recommended by someone you genuinely like and trust. A classic example is those home shopping parties, like Tupperware parties. They're a perfect demonstration of this principle. The host isn't some random salesperson, it's your friend. And your friend gets a commission on everything sold. So when you buy something, you're not just getting a new set of containers. You're supporting your friend, helping them out. Studies have shown that this friendship factor can influence our buying decisions even more than the actual features of the product. The power of social connection doesn't stop there. Even just hearing a friend's name can make you more cooperative. That's why some sales companies use what they call an endless chain of referrals. After a customer says they like a product, the salesperson asks for the names of a few friends who might also like it. Then, when the salesperson calls those friends and says, "Hey, your friend Sarah suggested I reach out," the chance of getting a no drops dramatically. But what happens when the persuader isn't a friend, but a total stranger? Well, their strategy is to make you like them first. One of the most successful car salesmen ever, Joe Girard, was a master at this. His secret? He offered fair prices, and he made sure his customers genuinely liked him as a person. So, what actually makes people like someone? According to the research, there are a few key factors. First, physical attractiveness. It might sound shallow, but good looks create a powerful halo effect. We subconsciously assume attractive people are kinder, smarter, and more trustworthy. This bias shows up everywhere, from political elections to job interviews. Second is similarity. We naturally connect with people who are like us, whether it's in our opinions, background, or even just the way we dress. Smart salespeople use this all the time. They'll find common ground. Maybe you're from the same hometown or you root for the same team, and use it to build rapport. Sometimes they'll even subtly mirror your posture or tone of voice. Third, we have compliments. I mean, who doesn't like being praised? The legendary salesman Joe Girard used to send over 13,000 personalized cards to his clients every month with simple messages like, "I like you." It sounds a little cheesy, but it worked. Research shows that even when we suspect a compliment might have an ulterior motive, we still tend to like the person giving it. Next up is familiarity and cooperation. The more we're exposed to something or someone in a positive way, the more we tend to like it. Familiarity really can breed fondness, but cooperation is an even more powerful way to build liking. Working together toward a shared goal builds trust incredibly fast, even between former rivals. Think about the good cop, bad cop tactic. The good cop seems cooperative and on your side, earning your trust. Or that car salesman who pretends to go to bat for you with his manager. It creates a feeling of teamwork. You and me against them. Finally, there's the principle of association. We subconsciously transfer our feelings about one thing to whatever it's connected with. Advertisers are masters of this. They pair their products with beautiful models, beloved celebrities, or images of success, hoping those positive feelings will rub off on the brand. We even do this ourselves. When our favorite sports team wins, we say, "We won." But when they lose, it's suddenly, "They lost." We want to be associated with success and distance ourselves from failure. So, as you can see, the liking principle is a multi-pronged tool that uses our deep need for connection and belonging. By understanding how attractiveness, similarity, compliments, cooperation, and association work, you can start to notice when someone's friendliness feels a bit too strategic. But the arsenal of influence doesn't stop here. Next part, we'll dive into one of the most fascinating and powerful principles of all: social proof. You won't believe how far people will go just to follow the crowd. Let's continue breaking down the weapons of influence. This time, we're diving into the fourth one, the principle of social proof. At first, it sounds pretty simple. When we're not sure what's right or wrong or what we should do, we tend to look at what other people are doing. Especially when we feel uncertain, the actions of others become a powerful guide for our own. Think about it. Are you more likely to walk into a restaurant that's packed with customers or one that's completely empty right next door? When you're shopping online, do you feel more confident buying the product that's labeled "one bestseller" with thousands of 5-star reviews? And have you ever noticed how many menus highlight certain dishes as most popular or customer favorites? A study mentioned in the book Influence describes how a restaurant chain did just that. They labeled a few menu items as most popular, and those dishes saw their sales jump by 13 to 20%. What's popular becomes even more popular. Even Netflix, which used to keep its viewership data a secret, eventually started publishing its top 10 lists. Why? Because they discovered that telling people which shows are trending makes those shows even more watched. That's social proof in action. Marketers absolutely love to use it. They'll say things like America's fastest-growing brand, or chosen by millions. This strategy saves them the effort of actually proving a product's quality. If everyone else likes it, that's often enough for our brains. Our minds are lazy. We assume that following the crowd is usually the safe, correct choice. Most of the time, what others are doing feels lower risk and more socially acceptable. It's another mental shortcut that's useful but also dangerous. Because once people realize how heavily we rely on others' behavior, they can start to manipulate that tendency. One of the most common tricks is faking popularity. Club owners sometimes create fake lines outside their venues to make the place look packed. Bartenders often seed their tip jars with a few dollar bills so new customers feel that tipping is the norm. Online, sellers use fake reviews and inflated ratings to make their products look popular. Even TV sitcoms use canned laughter, those loud fake laughs in the background, to trick you into thinking the jokes are funnier than they really are. And it works. Studies show people rate the same jokes as more amusing when laugh tracks are played. So, when is social proof the strongest? The book points out two conditions. First, uncertainty. When we're unsure what to do, when a situation is unfamiliar or ambiguous, we're most likely to copy others. Remember that most popular dish experiment? The label influenced new or infrequent customers the most, because they were the ones who didn't know what to order. But this instinct can also lead to tragedy. This is where we see the bystander effect. In an emergency, like when someone collapses in public, the more people there are watching, the less likely it is that any one person will help. Each person looks to others for cues. No one else seems worried. Maybe it's not that serious. Everyone assumes someone else will take responsibility, and in the end, no one does. If you ever find yourself in real danger, don't count on the crowd to step in. The most effective way to get help is to single someone out. Point and say, "You, in the blue jacket, please call 911. A clear, direct request breaks through the uncertainty and assigns responsibility. The second condition is similarity. We are most likely to imitate people who are similar to us. Advertisers know this well. That's why modern commercials feature ordinary people, not just celebrities. They want you to think, hey, people like me are using this. Studies back this up. Charity fundraisers who say, I'm a student here too, raise twice as much money. Kids learning to swim make faster progress when they watch other kids their age, not adult instructors. And, of course, teenagers are far more influenced by their peers than by their parents or teachers. That's the power of peer persuasion. There's also a hidden trap in how people try to use this principle, especially in public service campaigns. To discourage bad behavior like littering, they often highlight how widespread the problem is, saying something like, every year, visitors steal over 14 tons of wood from this national park. The intention is good, but the message also implies lots of people are doing this. This normalizes the bad behavior and can actually increase it. People think, well, if everyone else is taking a piece, maybe it's not a big deal. The right approach is the opposite. Emphasize that most people follow the rules. Say, the vast majority of our visitors respect the park and leave everything as they found it. That reinforces good behavior through positive social proof. So, the principle of social proof shows that we're deeply influenced by the actions of those around us, especially when we're uncertain or surrounded by people similar to ourselves. It's a powerful shortcut that helps us navigate society, but it's also a weakness that others can exploit. Understanding it helps us stay aware when we're being subtly nudged by everyone else. Speaking of influence, our next topic is another heavyweight weapon, the principle of authority. Why do we so often obey experts, leaders, or anyone in a uniform, sometimes against our own judgment? Just how powerful is authority's grip on the human mind? We'll explore that in the next part. Have you ever noticed how we automatically listen when someone in a uniform speaks? Or trust an opinion more just because the person has a fancy title? Beyond just following the crowd, there's another powerful force we often obey without question. It's the fifth weapon of influence, the principle of authority. This principle says that deep down, we all have a strong, built-in tendency to obey authority figures. And sometimes this obedience can push us to act against our own better judgment, even to do things we know are wrong. That might sound extreme, but psychology backs it up with one of its most famous and disturbing experiments, Stanley Milgram's obedience study. Imagine you've signed up for a psychology experiment. You're told it's about memory and learning. You're the teacher, and another person, the student, is in a separate room. But here's the twist. The student is actually an actor. Your job is to teach them word pairs. Every time they get one wrong, you have to press a button that delivers an electric shock. With each mistake, the voltage goes up. At first, it's just small shocks, a little flinch, but then the shocks get stronger. You start to hear screams of pain from the next room. The student begs you to stop, shouting that he has a heart condition. You hesitate. You feel terrible. You want to stop. But the researcher, a man in a white lab coat, calmly tells you, the experiment requires that you continue. Please go on. What would you do? Would you defy the scientist? Or would you obey and press the next button, even as the screams start to fade into silence? Before the experiment, Milgram predicted maybe 1 or 2% of people, the truly cruel ones, would go all the way to the maximum voltage. The results were shocking. Nearly 2/3 of ordinary, everyday people continued delivering shocks all the way up to 450 volts, a level marked danger, severe shock, which could be fatal. Many people were sweating, trembling, and even crying. Yet they still obeyed. Follow-up studies around the world with different ages and genders showed almost identical results. The real horror wasn't the experiment itself, but the truth it revealed. When ordered by an authority figure, good people are capable of doing terrible things. So, why does authority have such a powerful grip on us? From childhood, we're taught to obey our parents, teachers, and bosses. In society, this is usually a good thing. Experts often do know more than we do. Following their guidance helps us learn and avoid mistakes. It becomes a mental shortcut. If an expert says so, it must be right. But this shortcut can be dangerous because our obedience becomes automatic. We stop thinking critically when we see a sign of authority. Cialdini shares a chilling story from a hospital. A doctor wrote a prescription for a patient's ear infection. Place drops in our ear, meaning the right ear. But the nurse misread it as rear and administered the drops rectally. Neither the nurse nor the patient questioned it. Why? Because a doctor, the authority, gave the order. When authority speaks, our common sense can go silent. And here's the scariest part. People don't even need to be real authorities. They just need to look like one. We automatically respond to the symbols of authority. The first is titles. Titles like doctor, professor, or CEO instantly command respect. In one study, the same person was described to different groups as either a professor or a student. When asked to guess his height, the group who thought he was a professor rated him as several inches taller. The second symbol is clothing. Uniforms and professional suits are powerful authority cues. An experiment found that a man in a security guard's uniform could easily convince strangers to pick up litter or feed a parking meter for someone else, far more than when he wore casual clothes. We even follow people in business suits across the street against a red light more often than we follow people in jeans. And finally, status symbols. Expensive cars, watches, and jewelry also trigger our obedience reflex. Studies show that drivers wait much longer before honking at a luxury car at a green light compared to an economy car. We instinctively connect wealth with authority. The biggest danger is that we rarely realize how much these symbols influence us. We all like to think we're independent thinkers, but authority's pull works on a subconscious level. That's why it's so important to be mindful, not rebellious. Real experts deserve respect, but blind obedience is a recipe for disaster. The key is to ask ourselves, is this person a true expert, or are they just wearing the costume of one? Now that we've seen how authority can shape our actions, we're ready for the final weapon of influence: scarcity. Why does limited edition make us rush to buy? And why do phrases like "only 3 left in stock" make us act so fast? In our next part, we'll explore how our fear of missing out can be turned into one of the most powerful motivators of all. Okay, we've unpacked the power of authority. Now let's move on to the sixth weapon of influence, the principle of scarcity. This might be the one we see most often, and maybe the one we fall for the easiest. Simply put, the scarcity principle means we tend to value things more when they're hard to get. When something is limited in quantity or time, our brains just assume it's more valuable, and our desire for it goes way up. Think about it. Why do collectors go crazy over a postage stamp with a printing error? Because that mistake makes it rare, and rarity turns it into a fortune. Trash becomes treasure, all because of scarcity. We feel this effect all the time. Say you're chatting with a friend when your phone rings. Almost instantly, you feel this pull to answer it. Even though your friend is right there and the call probably isn't that important, you feel like you just can't miss it. That's scarcity in action. When we think an opportunity might slip away, it suddenly feels more precious. Our brains use this as a mental shortcut. From experience, things that are hard to get are usually better than things that are easy to get. So we use scarcity as a quick rule to judge value. But there's more to it than that. Scarcity also gets its power from something deeper called psychological reactance. When our freedom to choose feels limited or threatened, we instinctively want that freedom back. And how do we do that? By wanting the restricted thing even more. It's like telling a 2-year-old, "Don't touch that toy." The second you say no, that toy becomes the only thing in the world they want. That's reactance. This desire to reclaim lost freedom stays with us our whole lives. A funny, real-world example. Years ago, Miami banned phosphate-based laundry detergents. What happened next? People started smuggling them in and hoarding them. They even convinced themselves that the banned detergents worked better, claiming they cleaned more effectively and were gentler on clothes. In reality, the formula hadn't changed at all. Just the fact that it was forbidden made people believe it was superior. Reactance also applies to information. When information is restricted, it becomes more appealing, and we're more likely to believe it. In one study, college students were told a speech opposing co-ed dorms had been banned. Even without hearing the speech, their opposition to co-ed dorms actually increased. Censorship often backfires because the very act of banning something can make it seem more persuasive. Similarly, when we think information is exclusive or insider-only, we trust it more. The fewer people who know it, the more convincing it seems. Of course, people who want to influence us know just how powerful scarcity is, and they use it constantly. The most common tricks are limited quantity and limited time. Only a few left in stock. Sale ends in 24 hours. This is your last chance. Don't miss out. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. The goal is to make you feel that not buying means losing out forever. Experienced salespeople even use what's called the sold-out trick. Say you show interest in an item. The salesperson looks concerned and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Someone just bought the last one." Instantly, you feel this pang of disappointment and want it even more. Then, they say, "Let me just check the back room. Maybe there's one left in another store. If I find it, should I reserve it for you?" In that emotional moment, you agree. A few minutes later, like magic, they find one. And now you feel locked in. There are two conditions that make scarcity especially powerful. First, new scarcity feels worse than constant scarcity. Imagine a jar with 10 cookies and someone takes away 8, leaving just 2. Those 2 cookies suddenly look irresistible. But if there had only been 2 cookies from the start, you wouldn't care as much. Losing freedom hurts more than never having it at all. Second, competition makes scarcity go nuclear. If you think something is rare and you know others are trying to get it, your desire skyrockets. This is why bidding wars at auctions get so out of control. People lose their minds in the heat of competition. Real estate agents use this too. Several buyers have already viewed this property and are very interested. That sense of urgency and competition pushes people to act fast and stop thinking critically. So, how do we protect ourselves? The key is to remember that scarcity doesn't actually change an item's real value. When you feel your heart racing because something's almost gone, treat that feeling as a warning sign. Pause, take a breath, and ask yourself one simple question. Do I want this because it's useful and valuable, or just because it's hard to get? A cookie doesn't taste better just because there are fewer of them. When we understand the scarcity principle, we can stay calm and rational. But we're not done yet. There's one more weapon of influence to explore, perhaps the most subtle of them all: commitment and consistency. Why do we go to great lengths to stay true to what we've said or done, even when it no longer makes sense? We'll uncover that in our next part. Ever feel like once you say you'll do something, you're almost locked into it, no matter what? That's not just you being a good person. It's a powerful psychological force at play. Now, we're diving into the sixth weapon of influence: commitment and consistency. This principle is simple but incredibly effective. Once we make a choice or take a stand, we feel this huge pressure, both from inside ourselves and from others, to stick with it. We want to be seen as reliable, stable, and logical. After all, nobody wants to be called flaky or inconsistent, right? So, we naturally try to keep our words and actions aligned. But here's the tricky part. This drive is so strong that it can sometimes make us act against our own best interests. Let me tell you about the famous beach experiment. Researchers set up a scene where a fake thief would try to steal a radio. Normally, very few people would risk confronting a thief. But then the researchers changed one small thing. The person with the radio would ask a random stranger nearby, "Hey, could you please watch my stuff for a minute?" Almost every single person who said yes to that tiny request later jumped up to stop the Queen thief, some even chasing them down the beach. That small verbal commitment completely transformed their behavior. That's the power of that first yes. Influence experts are masters of this. They use a technique called the foot-in-the-door strategy. They know if they can get you to agree to a small, easy request first, you're far more likely to agree to a much bigger one later. There was a classic study on this. Researchers asked people to sign a simple petition supporting environmental protection. Easy, right? Almost everyone agreed. A few weeks later, they went back to those same people and asked them to put a huge, ugly, "Drive carefully" sign on their front lawn. The results were shocking. The people who had signed the small petition were nearly twice as likely to agree to this big, inconvenient request. Why? Because that initial small commitment had subtly changed their self-image. They started seeing themselves as the kind of person who supports good causes. And once that new identity took hold, their actions followed suit. So, what makes a commitment really stick? First, it has to be voluntary. When we feel like we chose to do something ourselves, without being forced, we're much more likely to honor it. Second, it needs to be public. The moment you declare something out loud, especially in front of others, you feel a much stronger need to follow through to protect your reputation. Third, there's effort. The more work we put into something, the more valuable it becomes to us. Think about intense training camps or difficult initiations. People who go through them often become the most loyal members. But the most important factor is what's called inner choice. The commitment has to feel like it came from within you, not because of a threat or a bribe. In one study, kids were told not to play with a cool toy. One group was threatened with big trouble, while the other was just gently told it wasn't a good idea. Later, when the kids who were only mildly warned had another chance, they still avoided the toy. They had internalized the choice. They believed they didn't want to play with it. The threatened kids went right for it. Here's where it gets really interesting. Once we make a commitment, it starts to grow its own legs. We start inventing new reasons to justify our decision, even if the original reason is gone. This is the lowball technique car salespeople use. They offer you an amazing deal to get you committed. You fill out paperwork, you imagine driving the car, you tell your friends. You're sold. Then, oops, the salesperson finds an error, and the price goes up. But by then, you've built up so many of your own reasons for buying the car that most people still go through with the worst deal. Your commitment grew legs. Consistency is our mental autopilot. It helps us navigate the world efficiently, but it's also a backdoor that can be used to influence us. By understanding how it works, we can protect ourselves from being manipulated. We've covered a lot, but there's one more weapon of influence left, and it's a big one. Unity. How is it different from just liking someone? And how does it create an unbreakable bond? We'll explore that next part. All right, we've explored 6 classic weapons of influence, and now it's time for the grand finale. The 7th and arguably the most fundamental principle of them all, unity. Have you ever noticed how we naturally split the world into us and them? It could be your family, your hometown, your country, or even just being a fan of the same sports team. We are constantly forming these little circles of belonging. The unity principle is built on this simple truth. We are far more easily persuaded by people we see as part of our own group. Now, you might be thinking, isn't that just the liking principle? Not quite. The liking principle says, I like you because you're like me. The unity principle goes deeper. It says, you are one of us. It's a powerful identity-based connection, a real tribal sense of belonging. When we feel someone is one of our own, our brain subconsciously includes them in our sense of self. We trust them more, we agree with them more, and we're way more willing to help them out. So, where does this powerful we-ness come from? Cialdini points to 2 main sources, shared identity and shared action. First, let's talk about shared identity. The most primal form of this is, of course, family. From an evolutionary perspective, helping our relatives means helping our own genes survive. That's why we're hardwired to care for and even sacrifice for them. How strong is this instinct? Cialdini ran a fascinating experiment. He asked college students to get their parents to fill out a long, boring survey. The catch? He told the students, if your parents complete this, you'll get 1 extra point on your final exam. The result was staggering. 97% of parents filled it out, all for a single, tiny point on their child's test. That's the power of family motivation. Even the legendary investor Warren Buffett uses this. In his letters to shareholders, he often writes things like, if my family asked me about the future of this company, here's what I'd tell them. That simple phrase instantly makes shareholders feel like they're in his inner circle, building an incredible amount of trust. Beyond blood ties, a shared location can be just as powerful. Being from the same town, state, or country creates a real bond. Cialdini tells a chilling story from a Nazi concentration camp. A guard, under orders to execute prisoners, came across one man he recognized from his own hometown. In that moment, he skipped that inmate and killed the next one instead. Even in a place designed to strip away all humanity, that shared identity of fellow countrymen overrode everything else. The second source of unity is shared action, doing things together. When people move, speak, or experience something in sync, they feel an almost magical connection. Think about clapping together at a concert, marching in step, or chanting in unison. These synchronized acts amplify our feeling of we. It's one reason the military puts so much emphasis on perfectly coordinated drills. It's not just about discipline. It's about forging unity, loyalty, and a band of brothers. This also explains why companies love team-building retreats. Crawling through mud or solving tough challenges together isn't just a fun day out. That shared hardship creates a shared identity. People who go through tough times together bond like comrades. Shakespeare nailed this in Henry V when the king declares, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers." The same thing happens when we create something together. You know that feeling when you build a piece of IKEA furniture? Even if it's a little crooked, you love it more because you made it. That's the IKEA effect. Now, imagine doing that with someone else. When we collaborate to solve a problem or build something, we don't just get attached to the result, we get attached to each other. This is why asking for someone's advice is often more powerful than asking for their opinion. Asking for advice says, "Let's solve this together." It creates a team. The principle of unity is a potent reminder that the feeling of "we're in this together" is one of the most powerful psychological tools out there. It builds trust, fosters cooperation, and amplifies influence, often without us even realizing it. So now we've covered all 7 weapons of influence: reciprocity, liking, social proof, authority, scarcity, commitment, and consistency, and finally, unity. But in our crazy, information-saturated world, these principles rarely work alone. They twist and tangle together, reinforcing each other in complex ways. So, how do they combine to shape the choices we make every single day? And more importantly, how can we use this knowledge to make wiser decisions instead of being unconsciously swayed? Let's wrap it all up in our final section. We're drowning in information and choices. Every day, it's a non-stop flood of data, new products, and urgent decisions. In this whirlwind, how can we possibly think through everything? The truth is, we can't. Our brains have a clever solution: mental shortcuts. Think about it. We follow the crowd, we trust experts, we want things that are rare, and we stick to our word. These are automatic responses that help us navigate our complex world without getting overwhelmed. Most of the time, they work great. They're like an autopilot for our brain, saving us time and energy. In today's fast-paced society, these shortcuts aren't just helpful, they're essential for survival. But here's the catch. Because these shortcuts are so automatic, they're also our biggest weakness. Some people know exactly how to push these buttons. They can fake popularity to trick you with social proof, or wear a uniform to exploit your trust in authority. They can create a false sense of urgency to make you buy something you don't need, or use a small favor to lock you into a much larger commitment. When this happens, our helpful autopilot gets hijacked. These principles of influence are turned against us, becoming tools for exploitation. The real danger isn't using shortcuts, it's that sneaky operators can corrupt them. So, what can we do? We don't want to throw away these valuable tools. Instead, we need to defend them. The first step is awareness. Understand these weapons of influence and how they're used. Learn to spot the fakes. When you feel that pressure to act immediately or notice someone faking their credentials, pause. Hit the brakes on that automatic response and switch to manual control. Ask yourself, is this real? What does this person really want? If I ignore this pressure tactic, would I still make the same choice? This moment of deliberate thinking is your best defense. Beyond protecting ourselves, we should also push back against those who abuse our trust. Call out their tricks, refuse their offers, and share what you know. By doing this, we're not just saving ourselves. We're protecting the reliability of these shortcuts for everyone. If these cues become polluted and untrustworthy, we all lose a vital tool for making sense of the world. Protecting our mental shortcuts is about protecting our ability to think clearly in the information age. I hope this helps you become a smarter thinker and a more confident decision maker in this complicated but fascinating world. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights.